Yes, we are live.
Yep. So I was just saying, and it's good that Joshua joined us, that I'm feeling that robotic space is in a kind of dynamic limbo. So there's a lot happening, and we can definitely see that we've climbed a step compared to, I don't know, 10 years ago, and we can see what the future might look like. But it feels like right now there's a lot of churn, a lot of little things happening and showing exciting stuff and then going away and something else happening. It's not that nothing's happening. A lot's happening, but it doesn't seem to be going in any particular direction. And but specifically, we don't see robots all around us, which is what theoretically we could have been seeing. So I don't know if the rest of you feel the same way.
I mean, the concept of seeing something all around you is such a. I mean, that's such a domain dependence thing.
Hmm.
Like we're in a time where we have a single private company in control of a fleet of it's nearly 1 million robots right now. Amazon is in control of today,
Yeah.
which is absolutely unprecedented. So, like somebody who's on the floor there, I mean, it's a very different experience in terms of robots all around us. I mean, it's literally that.
Surrounded by robots. Yeah, and also in a factory. So, but that's in a very limited context. Our daily lives are not changed by it. Okay, your daily lives are changed by having a cell phone, by having the internet, by chat GPT, but not by all of these robots.
The thing is, like, you ever walk around a built environment and really sort of comprehend the hands involved in that environment, just like the number, like just go to a grocery store and think about all the hands that touch the food,
Right.
and the dexterity for all that food, and and you go to the construction site and you see all the steel, and like the steel is moved by a bunch of hydraulics, which ultimately went all the way back down to a little valve controlled by some hands.
Yeah.
And so like that, I think the whole I mean that's the whole vision right now, right? Is everybody's like, now we have like some kind of ghost for the shell, but now we need the shell.
Yeah.
And there's all this like gold rush to that. What I don't know if they're gonna find any gold at the end, but
No, but you're right about the cell. So there's a ghost. I agree that if I look in the supermarket now at a product and I look at the same product 10 years ago, maybe I should imagine fewer people and more robots. But
yeah,
it's not changing my life in a qualitative way. In a quantitative way, I'm sure it's having an effect.
are you seeking your life to be touched by some robots, and like what would that look like? Like
No, it's the
what's
other
your
way.
ideal?
It's the other way around. It's not what I'm seeking. I'm saying when we look at what robots can do and at the amount of work that's happening and the exciting examples we see, I'm saying we're at a kind of limbo stage, maybe I should say, where the technology, I don't know if it's actually there, but it's making noises, but it hasn't touched my life. Do I want it to touch my life? Yeah, I don't have a choice. Okay. So yeah, I can get a Roomba. Okay, so if I had a dog, it'd be very useful to have a Roomba picking up all of the hair that the dog is shedding every day. But that's kind of little thing. I have a lawn. I can have a robot mowing the grass. But again, it's a little thing.
It's I think robots have for a very long time, they've been an infrastructure thing.
Right.
Like they're consequential to the infrastructure, and that's kind of what I mean. Is like, yes, there are records being broken today in these sort of like infrastructure level metrics. Like, yes, the factory, the fulfillment center, and all that. And then there's also the classic like superhuman robot things like intuitive surgical. And there's I mean, it's worth mentioning. There's a fair bit going on in the medical robotics. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty novel, and that doesn't touch your life until it does. But
No,
yeah, I mean the
I think you brought
consumer
a great example. But I think you brought a great example. When they do robotic surgery, it's not, except for the doctor, it's very different for the doctor. But for the patient, it's not very different. When they changed from open surgery to keyhole surgery, or from keyhole to catheter-based surgery, that made a huge difference for the patient. Not good or bad, of course, it was good, but a huge difference in what things look like. When people started putting in stents instead of bypass surgery, okay, that's life changing. You do a stent 2 days later, 1 day later, half a day later, you're up and about. You do open heart surgery, 3 months until you're up and about. So that's huge change. But if the stent was put in by a doctor or by a robot, so I don't know if to call it infrastructure. We're saving money. We're having better outcomes, but it's not different. And that's what I'm asking. And you asked if I want to be touched. I don't know what would my life look like when the robots start actually popping out of infrastructure. I mean, I remember
It's
that I
still in infrastructure because it's really hard to make robots that are not in controlled environments. Basically, when people get involved, you have to be you have to build robots that are like not going to harm them. Otherwise, you are controlling, and then basically, yeah, I don't think we actually completely know how to build such robots.
well, I remember when the internet started. I could not imagine what the internet would be like. Okay, um, I remember my total shock when I was in the middle of nowhere and suddenly get a cell phone call saying, "Are you able to do such and such and such and such next week?" Okay, so I couldn't imagine it ahead of time. But I am asking, you know what? It seems like the robots are not doing that for me yet. What is it going to look like when robots start affecting my life?
I mean, is really what you're getting at consumer? Is that what we're talking about? Is consumer robotics?
It doesn't have to be consumer robotics. I mean, imagine that when I wait for a bus, instead of standing in line and pushing and hoping that they don't close the doors on me, a robot comes, picks me up, and puts me inside. Okay, I'm not saying that's how it should be. So that's not a consumer product, but it's touching my life. It's, changing what I'm doing. I go to the supermarket. Okay, I read out my list, and robot says, wait here 5 minutes, and I get a shopping cart filled with 80% of what I wanted.
Well, at that point, why doesn't it just deliver to your home?
I'm
But
talking now. You're talking about efficiency. I'm talking about what it means that my life is different, and it doesn't have to be consumer. It doesn't have to be something that I bought and I put in my house. It could be in a store. It could be at work. Most of us don't work
yeah,
manufacturing jobs.
by consumer, I'm really just getting because I feel like what we're talking. You're right. We're not talking about efficiency. We're talking about contact area. We're talking about the contact area in the day to
Yep.
day for the machine.
Yep.
Have you heard about this a new company by Rodney Brooks, Robust AI?
What is it?
No,
Uh,
well, maybe. I don't think so.
I'll share the screen. So it's basically like they are trying to build robots from the ground up, but always with people involved. So the robots might look simple, but they are always interacting with people. At least that is their goal. I don't know how much they are on the way to it.
Well, Joshua, let me ask you: do you expect your life to change when we get to robot singularity?
I've always I think lately I've kind of increasingly subscribed to uh, what I'd consider to be like the Star Wars robot outlook,
Hmm.
which is like there are ambient robots, but they're definitely not all humanoids,
Right.
and they are blended. There's like a high mix of like mobile robots and like integrated into the infrastructure robots that are stationary.
Hmm.
So that's kind of more of the outlook that I see personally. Um, the one thing that's constant to me though that I feel like gets thrown around a lot is just the general consideration of novelty when it comes to robots around humans. I feel like that is always whether it's um, an explicit or an implicit topic of discussion, especially when you're talking about like robotic startups. Uh, they did like people get bored so quickly, like it becomes ambient in a way. Like I literally don't notice autonomous cars driving next to me anymore,
And
and
that's exactly the point.
it only took it only took and I'm like a technologist or whatever that recognizes the spectacle of what it took. And it's just like they just kind of fade into nature, into the rest of the noise. And I think so often we talk about the robots in the context of like an interaction or a novel thing, when ultimately I think it's really truly a raw utility value is the only lasting benefit, as is usually the case. It's like, is this actually adding really serious value to what I'm doing, in all senses of the word, or is there some kind of a novelty that we think is going to change a behavior or change the way we do things when it just won't. Like I just don't see the spectacle of the autonomous car driving next to me anymore, and it only took 6 months, if that.
Right, but it's driving next to you the same way a human would be driving next to you.
Well, yeah, because humans are pretty good at driving,
Right.
so it.
So it's not affecting my life. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it was built to be invisible. And at some point, it's not going to be invisible.
What would count as visible and in your life to you? Like a humanoid robot butler making your tea, as opposed to something in a car form factor?
Well, that's an interesting point. In other words, I'm not the part of society that has a butler making their tea every day. If having robots would move me into that part of society, I would definitely notice that.
Mm,
I
Okay.
think there's actually two conversations here. One is there's that old distinction between robots that look like familiar appliances, so it kind of enters your normalcy field, that type of robot, versus robots that like kind of change your experience of the built environment because they have different form factors that are like unique to robots. So that's one distinction, and that's partly, I think, a mix of taste and culture. Like America seems to want more appliance-looking robots. Japan seems to want more like robot-looking robots, like more fictional robot-looking robots. But I think there's also a deeper, more interesting direction of like what robot capabilities fundamentally are too rich and expressive to even fit into the smart appliance form factor, right? Like it happens that driverless cars are basically cars with like the human function replaced by the robot function, but otherwise, if it's working, you can't tell the difference. Like maybe if it started like driving at like 150 miles per hour bumper to bumper, that's a level of driving skill humans can't do. But and by the way, this was demonstrated 20 years ago. It can do that, but chances are we will not be comfortable, and we won't drive in robo taxis that drive
Right.
in such inhuman ways. But I'm also trying to think: are there like fundamentally new form factor things that can't be reductively mapped to appliance form factors? Um, and I think there's a B2B version of this question too, right? Like, Yasha, you mentioned like Amazon having whatever 100,000 robots or how
Million.
number
Million.
is
Million.
million. Yeah. But at least the Kiva generation of robots, it's interesting, but it's not too far removed from like controlled environment automation to me. Like, since I was part of that lab that came out of like Rafti Andrea's lab, and it came out of the robo soccer world. The robo soccer university lab level robots from which the Kiva robots came out, they looked much more inhuman and weird form factor and doing really interesting things. Whereas once it went into the factory, it kind of became boring. It went in like rectilinear paths and would just hook onto a rack of stuff and move it around. So it kind of, they almost like threw away the fun parts of the robots, soccer robots, to make the Kiva robots. But anyway, yeah. Sorry. So a bunch of different points there.
No,
B2B humor, normal versus uh, weird, and then stuff that can be reduced to appliance versus stuff that cannot, right?
well, it's exactly what you said about Kiva robots and what Joshua said about autonomous cars. They are made to act simple and predictable and expected, and to the extent we can call it invisible. I would say it's kind of difficult to tell the difference between a Kiva robot and an assembly line with conveyor belts. I mean, of course, you can tell the difference, but it acts similar to an extent. Obviously, not similar at all.
And I think partly it's we don't know how to go. Like I'm trying to think back, like early steam engine or steam engine trains were restricted by law to being no faster than horses. I believe at some point there
Right.
was. I remember one weird example. I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently some place passed a law that horses were so startled by bicycles or cars, I'm not sure which it was, that there was a law that if you if you saw a horse cart coming the other way, you had to like dismount, move to the side of the road, and like dismantle your vehicle to not startle the horse. I don't know if this is true or not. It sounds ridiculous, but you can see that already, like within like a decade or two, cars started going much faster than horses ever could, and soon hit the limit of like human reaction times, right? So maybe there's like an expansion of the envelope that's going to happen with robotics as well. Like they corner differently, I'm told. So yeah.
I do want to point out one thing that's being discussed here is like the concept of form factor, and is there really a weight that carries in this, especially to the concept of like normalcy or like novelty dissolution? Because it is kind of funny. Building a humanoid robot is almost the most boring or ignorable type of robot you could build.
Right.
Like it's literally the most familiar thing.
Well, No, not quite. I disagree there. Like humanoid robots, I think there's three things going on there. One is it's just like humans are a narcissistic vain species, so we want to like build technology that looks like us. But the second is I think there actually is a serious argument to be made that some applications do lend themselves to humanoid form factor. This was Asimov's argument that you want to send humanoid robots to colonize other planets because they'll like terraform the environment so humans can be effective there. But a version of that argument is if you want them to integrate into like apartments and houses that are built for humans already, like counters are a certain height, shelving is a certain height, you either like completely rethink the design of human living spaces around like more compact form factors, or you build things that are basically it's the simplest way. You build a humanoid robot to do that. But the third thing, and I think this is where Japan is kind of ahead of the US, it's that once you start reaching like uh, pet animal and human form factors, you open up like affordances that purely utilitarian robots don't have, which is that you can relate to them. And I mean, sex bots are the most obvious example, but just in general, lonely people have companions, old people have friends, that kind of stuff starts to become unlocked. And I think Japan is kind of like taking that seriously with its aging population, right?
Actually, there are already robots like pet robots in Japan, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's quite interesting. But like it also depends, right? Like we have changed the infrastructure in 100 years for cars,
Yeah.
so it also depends on the times we are living in, and then we are assuming that we might not change, but we might change in like 50 years. It might be a slow change.
Yeah.
Because like there are already small changes for like the small robots. So in like in Oulu, so there are lots of bike paths. So these food delivery robots use them a lot. so that way, like the infrastructure is already being in Oulu is already being used by the robots.
Yeah, those food delivery robots are a good example of like
Yeah.
pushing the boundary of form factors, right? Because they're small, they're like smaller than bicycles and nothing like them. Well, maybe shopping carts are an example of things that around that form factor. But they presumably in future they can do things like call elevators and ride elevators to higher floors, things that we don't normally expect vehicles to do. That's actually an interesting point. Automated vertical transport is rare. Like dumbwaiters used to be a thing in old buildings. You guys know what a dumbwaiter is, right?
Mm,
Small
No.
Elevator.
trash. Oh, a dumbwaiter is a very small
like
elevator,
food.
not meant for humans. But yeah, if there's a kitchen in the bottom floor, the cook will put like a dinner there and like push it up, and then you'll get it in your upper
Food
apartment.
for cats, for
Yeah.
assassins. Yeah.
There's a startup around here trying to build like the future elevator, uh, which is kind of interesting because elevators, that's a great example of a slow moving like infrastructure industry that there certainly is the sci-fi like futuristic like not even wrong what elevators could be, and then there's the reality of like the actual business considerations trying to enter into the elevator market. But yeah, they're called hyperlift. They're pretty interesting.
Are they going to have horizontal elevators too?
I'm not sure if they're going to do horizontal, but the main thing is like they it's an elevator that can go like it powers it's like powered off the. It's really good for tall buildings because it can because that's a key issue with elevators in tall buildings is
Yeah.
like if
Long
you
cable.
have cables, there's a lot of problems. So if it's like powered by the elevator itself, like a little car, it's kind of like a little Tesla, going vertical.
Hmm.
That solves a lot of problems.
So you see, so that's a great example. When I walk into my office building, it's completely transparent to me what technologies the elevator is using. Maybe the building is cheaper. Maybe I have to change fewer elevators, but that's it. But imagine if the elevator was just for me. Okay? Imagine if the elevator would take me horizontally. Imagine if it took me from floor to floor, including opening and closing the doors, in less than 3 seconds. Okay? These would change my life.
Actually, Jetsons has a lot of robots that are really interesting. Uh, so I think, like for example, this one is really nice.
Well, I just want to be sure.
So the guy gets ready with the it's streaming.
Yesterday, I walked out of here with my shoes.
Got stuck. Well,
On your way to work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is his school day, huh?
it's something similar. Like your entire house is kind of a robot.
A robot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is like the smart appliance thing, right? That's kind of the Jetsons is a lot of that. I have not watched the
Yeah.
Jetsons in a long time.
But they don't have any appliance today that's going to put my shoes on, even in a stupid way, or put on my jacket.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with the like truly like on a manipulation level, the truly so like I think the t-shirt folding appliance startup is was it Samsung that was doing that? It's just like that concept is now made kind of null and void. Like the concept of having a dedicated square footage to fold shirts is stupid when you can see there's clearly going to be some kind of at least high end for now, home robot in the future.
Right.
It just makes no sense. So it's kind of a like, I think in the manipulation context, or I think I mentioned before here, the my favorite robot appliance that I've seen so far is the Roadimatic. It makes a little roti bread. I think it has
Yeah.
12 motors inside of it,
Yeah.
and this little teeny appliance. But
Yeah,
that's
I
again,
like that too, but I don't find it for any reasonable price. But I like that machine too.
yeah, but I mean, it's interesting in a few ways. Like it's like a successful. I consider it to be a robot by any
Yeah.
reasonable metric. So it's like a successful home robotics company, which is extremely vanishingly rare.
But
It's also
not
in the
appliance.
kitchen. It's in a kitchen appliance, which is also rare. So it's kind of like, and it's consumer, which is it's kind of like these three things don't usually align. So it's
What is it called?
Roadimatic.
Makes flatbread.
Okay.
Yeah, I almost bought the Rotimatic. I think there were similar ones for dosas and tortillas.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I make a more fundamental distinction beyond form factor between robots and uh, that kind of thing, because that one seems to me like, I don't know, a unitasker automation thing. It does not have general sort of like robotics capabilities. To me, a robot is a very generalized kind of like how I make a roti is literally rolling it out with a rolling pin. So the rolling pin is a specialized appliance, but my hands are very general end effectors, and then I cook it on a griddle, which is a very general kind of like utensil dish combo, right? Which can do a lot of other things. Whereas the Rotimatic is like it's like a piece of factory automation. I don't think of it as a robot. There has to be a certain generality in relatively unstructured environments for me to think of it as a robot.
But
almost,
that is fundamentally what we're competing with, because it's like I mean humanoids are so a humanoid is literally an uncreative product manager and with a big engineering team behind it. Is that like in the sense that like it's not even wrong as a
Can you
first
say that
answer of
again?
what you would build.
I think
That-
that's actually why is that wrong? Like, okay, one of the problems I have in my kitchen is basically counter space exhaustion and appliance bloat. Like, we have like 8 different things that are basically motors with like rotating end effectors. So we
You
have
can
blenders, blah blah blah,
you can
and
buy a robot. They have
exactly.
special kitchen robots
But
on a bar with arms
Yes,
that
we saw that one, but that's like a halfway solution. Uh, I can think of like a humanoid robot that does the inefficient but low tech appliance. So instead of having like a blender and whatever the other variants of those things are, literally these are all versions of like just pick up a general purpose bowl and a general purpose like spatula or a whisk or something and do it the way humans used to before we tried to like put a
yes,
motor in everything, right? So make the have a general purpose robot with somewhat general purpose end effectors and then give it an extremely dumb set of like environmental tools which are not electric and can even be traditional. They can be like, wooden bowls and things. So I kind of like that solution because very dumb environment. So it's actually just like there used to be, thick server, thin client type of discussions. I think we're talking basically smart robot, dumb environment versus medium smart robot, medium smart environment versus dumb robot, smart environment. I don't like the environment to be smart because that strikes me as an unscalable, make everything a factory type of approach. Like, I don't want my kitchen to turn into a super smart environment.
but so this is kind of what I'm getting at. So it's like and the context of infrastructure versus generality, like dedicated infrastructure versus generality. Like the classic example is building a pipeline. Like you could have a million humanoid robots carrying backpacks of oil across, the land, or you could build a pipeline. Like there's certain just basic economics surrounding that and countless intermediary examples. But the thing that
Yeah, I'm
is
not disputing
interesting,
that. I mean, we already have that solution. My point is that we want to expand the design space where, in some cases, we now have this other pattern available as well. Like, obviously, not for oil pipeline and lots of other things. Lots of things should, like, anywhere where there's like economies of scale and narrow economies of scope, you should go with the specialized automation equipment. But I think we are like too easily giving up on, I don't know, dumb, unstructured environments and general purpose agent patterns. We've not really explored that design space at all.
I mean, I would actually liken the refocused interest and activity behind large language models to be covered by very similar physics to looking at humanoids again, and specifically because applying sort of like automated systems and inference to text is the like not even wrong elementary first application of these systems, right? But like the first actually commercially successful examples we had with like machine learning or character recognition systems, which is actually that modality, right? But now we have like all this horsepower and we're doing all sorts of complicated things beyond basic like n-gram models, and then we have something that all of a sudden seems to be more than an echo. So it's like that. I think we're like almost going back because all of sci-fi and all of the beginning of robotics. I mean, we've been building humanoid robots since like the 40s,
Yeah, I don't
50s.
want to
Like there's
over-index on humanoid. Humanoid is just an example of generalist smart agent versus arbitrarily unstructured dumb environment. That's the pattern I want. So it doesn't have to be humanoid. It can be octopus or insect or some completely new thing that's discovered through, I don't know, design optimization that nobody's ever seen before. But what I think I like, and which I think is my definition of robotics, is you kind of have unstructured dumb environment with smart general purpose agent within it.
so
That kind of like,
let,
yeah.
let me give you an example. Okay, I go into my living room. It just so happens that in my mood that I'm in now, the sofa should be at an angle to the coffee table, and the two recliners should be moved sideways. Okay, that's how it should be. And tomorrow, and after I relax and smoke my cigar and drink my cognac, so it should be the other way around. The coffee table should be moved away, and the seats should be moved. The recliners should be moved closer. Now, I can't have that today. Okay, but if I had a robot, it could turn my environment into this kind of adaptive environment. It knows my mood, and the robots come, pick up my furniture, and move it around. It takes them about half a minute. In fact, they could be doing it as I'm leaving this room and walking into the living room. So that's an example on how the environment became, in an unstructured way, became smarter. And I think that's the kind of thing you're looking at. Okay, so that my life would be very different if I had something like that. And comparing it to the way rich people live is like comparing a king who has a private theater group to us who have, I don't even know what the number is, TV shows available on Netflix. Okay, you can't compare it. So even if a ancient king or a modern super rich person could have hordes of servants that whenever he goes from room to room, they rearrange the furniture, it would still not be the same qualitative as what I'm just talking about that the robots are doing it. Because they're so much more sensitive, precise, predictive, quiet, unobtrusive, and so on. So I'm looking for that. I'm saying I can imagine the same way my life changed with other technologies that came. I can imagine that my life would change when robotics were able to do what Venkat is saying.
You actually made me think of like you extended the way I was thinking a little bit just now. Like I have this mental model of like the industrial age is based on economies of scale and scope, right?
Mhm.
Scale is what can be done efficiently if you make more of it. Scope is there like some fairly narrow specialized thing that can still make like a large variety of things, right? So like the same factory makes peanut bags and chip bags. That's
Yeah.
scope. And I think what I call economies of variety is an effect of software eating the world, which is basically mass customization. If you have smart enough software, you can like explore combinatorial spaces, do like it's still not machine learning, but it's like you now have enough data that like I can say that I like these 10 flavors of coffee to Nespresso, and it sends me the same bundle every few months. That possibility was not there with like just scale and scope, so that's variety. I think what you just described, I would add the maybe the concept of economies of ooze. I was using the idea of like oozy technologies, things that become like gray goo. Like if you have like enough parameters describing your environment, you don't even need to consciously describe your preferences like you do at Starbucks, right? You go to Starbucks, that's economies of variety. Instead of just one kind of coffee or what coffee and tea, there's like a combinatorial matrix of I want like, I don't know, cinnamon dolce latte with 3 pumps, whatever, vanilla, that kind of thing. People order weird things. But now, to use your analogy, maybe I walk into a Starbucks and there's no menu at all. It reads my expression and my body temperature and my sugar level from my glucose sensor, and it concocts like a completely unique drink sentiment match to my mood, and it just delivers it to me, right? Like
So
actually, Hitchhiker's
that's
Guide had a machine
non-physical.
like this. Yeah.
That's
This has
non-physical.
been
Okay, I just want to point out what you described now is what you might want to call a software robot. It's not a physical robot.
Yeah, that was just the easy example that came to mind. But things like moving the couch to just the right angle, lowering the light intensity to the right angle, all those things are almost continuous variables. So you can apply the same logic to physical manipulatable environments as well, right? Like maybe you want a particular cigar and you want your drink made a particular way based on your mood. You can do all that. So it's the same principle. You go from economies of variety, which are points in a discrete combinatorial space to things that are like computed as elements of like high dimensional mixed continuous and discrete space, where it's like you might be getting a combination that has never existed before and never can exist again. So that's the extreme of what robotics can maybe get at.
For what it's worth, Coca-Cola was exploring this very concept with the Coke Zero machine. That machine is very sophisticated. There's a lot going on in there, and I remember listening to a podcast. They were talking about this concept of everybody having their own flavor of Coke, which is really to say, like, you could walk up to such a machine, and there'd be some kind of auth layer, and then or identity layer, and then it could be like, this is your tuned Coke from last time that you've tuned. Like, do you want to retune it, or is this exactly it? And then because it's basically an inkjet printer, and it has all these cartridges, and it goes and make exactly the right Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look inside one of these things, it has like a dozen uber super concentrated cartridges and little pumps, and these are deployed all over the place now.
And it can also do it with 3D printing. In other words, it's not just different flavors, it could happen in different layers. I'm just pointing out you also have 3D printing of food in the same sense.
Well, this is like, in terms of an engineering problem, this is the only way we could make a food 3D printer that was like scalable. Yeah. Food, 3D printing food is a humanoid assembling my burger 3D printing. Like that's kind of
it's not additive manufacture when he makes your hamburger, but when he makes your sushi and he takes the rice and he clumps it together,
one grain at a time.
Exactly.
What was the device in Star Trek called that makes different types of food? I forgot the name.
Replicator. Yeah, that was
Replicator.
replicators.
Yes.
Replicators, though, I think kind of had like implied, I don't know, background. Like they always ordered traditional things, like give 'em coffee or tea or things like that. The one I'm thinking of is this device in Hitchhiker's Guide, where it would like craft a drink exactly to your preferences. Like it would invent one, but the joke was that it would always make the exact same thing anyway. But the principle was that it would like completely read your mind and get the exact drink suited to your mood. But you can actually extend the spectrum beyond to like iterative discovery, right? Like the way designers do comps, and like you don't know like what style you prefer of something, they'll show you comps and like keep trying combinations till you say, all right, finally I prefer this one, and they kind of like co-learn with you and converge on your locked preferences. And chefs do that too, right? If you have like a personal chef, you can say that, oh, I'm in the mood for something spicy with some vegetables, and they'll make suggestions. Maybe they'll make you a dish. You don't like it, they'll change it. I've seen rich people actually have this lifestyle. I know people with executive chefs who have this lifestyle. I mean, and also like, overindulgent moms also do that for their kids. It's not necessarily a billionaire thing. But I think the spectrum goes from one size fits all pure mass manufacture, that's like economies of scale, Ford Model T, black car. Then you have economies of scope, which is the original Chevrolet GM line, which was the first line to introduce multiple cars, so you could like pick a color for your car. Then you have like what I would call economies of variety, where if you're rich enough, you can like ask for a custom paint job from a high-end car. And then you get to like what I'm thinking of as I should write this one up, economies of ooze, where it's like some sort of gray goo type manufacturing technology where it'll create like a completely unique piece of art basically for you, not like a slightly customized version of a thing, but a piece of art. And then the last stage of the spectrum is it iteratively discovers with you what you want. So, and I think this is a general concept, but robotics can be placed on that spectrum. Yeah, the last stage is, I guess, co-learning improvisation where you co-create what you want with the robot.
I think art, when you say art, do you mean something which is evocative, something which makes us react to it, or you just mean the continuous optimization and matching up to what you want?
I think I'm making a hypothesis that if you get to that continuous optimization and matching to sentiment and mood, you actually create the uh, necessary and almost sufficient conditions for each thing to be a piece of artwork. Like anytime I see those Instagram or Twitter photos or videos of like truly customized cars, it's like the high-end car maker has created a piece of artwork for you with like very specific paint choices and like patterns and things. I saw one really good one recently. That's what's making me think about that. But yeah, those high-end sports cars or luxury cars look like artworks to me, like custom commissioned artworks.
When you said that, what I heard was an agent other than yourself taking a creative liberty and contribution to the output.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which will happen the moment the design space gets too large for you to express explicit preferences about fully. Like at most you can specify like 10% of it. Like I'm not a painter, but if I want like a painting for my house, I might say something like, I want a landscape, I want natural scenery, make me mountains and oceans, but I'm not enough of an artist to know the 1,000 other variables that go into like making a good living room painting. So all those are decisions the artist agent will have to like make for me. Whereas something like make me a latte is like low dimensional enough where it's effectively just outsourcing. It's like, all right, if I didn't have the money, I could make roughly a Starbucks latte myself.
So you're saying there's no exploring in the creation.
Yep.
So it's a difference between choosing one out of 10,000 Netflix shows and generating one using Sora.
Yeah, there's something of that too.
So Joshua, how long do I have to wait for this vision?
The automated furniture thing, it's funny you mentioned that because I do have a friend with a proclivity for like putting motors on furniture, and it's it's an interesting concept. It's always like it's like if you ever played the Portal video game. This is a kind of aperture science, like completely synthetic, physically synthesized world, like physically synthesized synthetic world that you're living in. But it's also like, yeah, even here we've been talking about this, and there's this boundary, this blurry boundary of the system doing there's the what to do and then what's taking action. So like, what do we need to do here, and then who's going to do it? Who's going to do it is a question of actuation, but the what to do is, I can't tell anymore where the limiter is, honestly. It seems to be ping-ponging back and forth in a fuzzy way. Is it like,
Yeah.
We're getting very close, it seems, depending on the number of bankruptcies. How many we'll have commoditized humanoid robots that are like some amount of money, and then I think the limiting factor there will be the what's the robot supposed to be doing with its hours. That'll be the limiting factor, not the robot itself. In this context of like, let me ask you, if you had a humanoid sitting in your house today, like, is that what you'd have it do? Would you have it like move your furniture around randomly when you left the house, or like, I mean, like, what do you like? Do you know? Do you have like an agenda
I
for it?
definitely have lots of things for a robot humanoid butler to do, starting with all my chores, like clean up, do the dishes, load the dishwasher, unload the dishwasher, unbox all the Amazon packages and break down the boxes and take it to recycling. I mean, modern life is full of like these horrible, mundane, slightly unstructured tasks that could fill hours, and mostly we kind of set our lower our standards to the level where we can just about keep up and deal with like the crappy. But my let me put it this way: my ideal standards are here, but where I can actually hit with my labor commitment is here, and a robot would like close the gap. But I wanted to share one thing, Anuraj, if you can put that on the screen. This I was just reminded. So this is actually an art thing by my advisor Raf, who founded Kiva. We literally have a little bit of AI going on.
I
This would
think
scare
that
the shit out of people, right?
this,
If it
this,
starts moving at night.
this killer sofa and this killer tire, movies like that. But
But I mean, technically, this is like really old. He did this, I think 15, 16 years ago. So all it takes is a camera and add some motors to the table caster, and it can do this. So it's all the intelligence isn't like, what would you want to do if you had a table that was actuated this way? And some of it would be boringly utilitarian, like, in the morning, go to the window and become a breakfast table. In the evening, go somewhere else and do something else. If there's guests, bring drinks, something like that. But yeah, I think your idea of like, reflect sentiment and mood and like arrange in like more abstract ways. Like maybe if you want like a more open arrangement versus a tight arrangement, all that can be done with this basic hardware.
yeah, but I'd be doing much more. First, of course, I have shutters, and my shutters on the outside, and they're small, and I have a lot of them, and there's a lot of dust around here. So the robot could spend all day just cleaning off the dust. And if you find ants in the house, you have to kill them one by one. You don't want to use spray, that's poison. But in a more positive, constructive manner, I notice you have some nice wallpaper behind you. I want a new painting every day. It can paint at night, get up in the morning. My house looks different. Wait, I have a party tonight. Quickly, give me some pop modernistic look. So there's no problem right now finding a way to occupy one robot or two robots or three robots. What would actually happen was I would start feeling bad that I'm wasting their capability on something as mundane as rearranging my furniture. Okay, it'd be much more interesting for them to do something useful, like planting wheat and sending it to places that have famine. It's more useful.
I think maybe it's controversial, but I think most of us, if we had a humanoid robot, it would spend over half of its time idle.
No,
which is
And
fine.
maybe
I mean, there's already data proving you right. Like when rich people used to have lots of servants, this is in Thorstein Veblen's theory of the leisure class. One of the biggest uses was put them in livery uniform and have them standing around as like a very costly signal that you're a rich person. Like literally, you're rich enough that you can have people in stiff uniforms standing by your doorway, making you look important. And this is like, honestly, historically, this is what people who could hire a lot of labor would do. It's like, if you have some money, you hire people to do your housework. If you have more money, you buy land and make them work the land. If you have like too much money and you don't know what to do with it, put people in shiny uniforms and like stupid hats and make them stand in front of your door. So there's that. But to your point, Mayor, about the ant killing example made me think you could actually flip that. Did you guys see the weed killer
Yeah.
robot, the agriculture
Yeah.
thing? Little laser, much more humane and like non like this is reversing the costs of economies of scale, like pesticide and normal ways of weeding and pest control. They're like huge brute force and below our scale of noticing, but they're like terrible. We shouldn't be like destroying so much just to like do agriculture. And this was, yeah, that's to my go-to example of like you can get away from economies of scale if economies of ooze are cheap enough, where you can kill like one small weed at a time. That was really good. That weed killer thing. That was John Deere, right?
The day after I saw that, we went to volunteer, and I spent a few hours in the sun weeding some cauliflower with a stick with something at the end. So yeah, I wanted the robot.
Which weeder are you guys talking about?
It looked like a regular farm tractor with an attachment.
It
type
has
thing.
camera, and it has a laser, and when it sees a weed, it zaps it with a laser.
You're talking about
Carbon robotics. Carbon robotics is it? Let me find it.
Yeah,
these
but
guys?
there's lots of them. It like this one, yeah.
Yeah, I just put the link there. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah, this is a poster I got from them at the World Ag Expo. This is so. It's funny that you bring up laser weeding. This is actually, man, this takes me way back. This is like 4 years ago now. I was really into laser weeding about 4 years ago. I was like really into the concept. The thing is, and this is actually a thread that's relevant in a lot of places these days. There's a really good book by I'm blanking on the name. I'll send it later. Really sharp guy. He founded, I think it was called Raven. Now it was like a autonomous combine startup. It was like a modular combine that could trade different implements, but it was like a huge robot, like the size of a whole combine, which is like a small building. Chemistry is extremely energy efficient, and genetic engineering is even more so. When you combine those two, it's incredible how energy efficient something like an herbicide is. So laser weeding, the calculus is always this matter of, like how often do you have to pass over the acre to, boil the water? Because effectively what you're doing is you're vaporizing or heating water. So you got to heat up the water to kill the plant. And it's an exponential function of how much water the plant adds to itself every day, as it's growing. So then there's this whole math of how often you have to go over them to suppress the growth versus like, because you're effectively converting diesel into hot water to disable growth. I mean, that's really the math, and it's like versus doing some genetic engineering and then you spray it once.
Yeah, but you have side effects. The problem is not the cost. The problem is the side effects. When you cook a weed, bugs eat what you cooked. But when you put herbicide, you affect the entire ecosystem.
Or you can design bugs that only eat the weed. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things.
Oh, yeah, of course. You can do that. But then you have a risk of building a bug which, after 3 generations, decides not to eat the weed, but to eat your plant. And by the way, weed is just a plant that you don't want. It's not a plant that's bad. Okay, wheat growing in a cornfield is a weed.
On the oozification piece, it's like an analog thing because I've been doing some work in the climate tech space, and there's the big one's direct air capture. To me, that's like we would need to have a certain level of ooze to be neutral and then negative. I personally think, again, using the most energy efficient technology we have, which is like nanoscale engineering, we probably need to design some kind of organism, like perhaps a super algae that grows in the ocean and clumps and falls to the ocean floor. That's like the only thing that truly will scale in this context. And I mean, that's really the ultimate ooze, right?
That's what people are trying to do. In other words, they say that we already have that algae. All we have to do is put some iron, and then that algae will be able to grow faster
Oh yeah.
and
Okay.
do exactly what you said. You
All
know,
right. The algae is I think synthetic. It's actually SynBioBeta here in the Bay Area. It's a cool conference this week, but I think biorobots are a kind of interesting angle.
absolutely. Like the slug eater. Remember the slug eater? It goes in your garden, sees a slug, puts it in back, it ferments in back, generates energy to power the robot and the computer. Slugbot.
No, I have not seen that. Could you
Not
send that?
Slugbot?
Slugbot.
Slugbot. I have not heard of this one.
Yeah, okay, just a second. I'll put the link. I'm putting the link in the chat of the what's it called? StreamYard.
It harvested the slugs for energy? That's terrifying.
If you're a slug, yeah. But I've had horrible slug and snail damage over the winter here.
Yeah.
I planted bulbs, and most of my bulbs didn't grow. Not they didn't flower, they didn't grow. And I checked, and I could find finely mowed down leaves at the ground level. I
Yeah.
planted them. The slugs were just having great time.
Well, that is a machine very close to nature.
Yeah.
All right, I got to jump as well.
Yeah.
Okay. See you next week. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.